Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And I'm Ron Block.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless story to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. On this week's show, Ron and I are thrilled to welcome bestselling author Ruth Ware to discuss her new novel, One Perfect Couple. The book will be released on May 21st, and we are so excited to speak with Ruth.
But first, we have just a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com.
There you'll find show schedules, details on upcoming in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page, to the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, to our merch store, our book subscription box, and our weekly email newsletter sign-up. In other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction, we offer a lot, be sure to check it out at friendsandfiction.com.
You did that well. I always scramble the words. I say a lot of stuff. And speaking of things that we offer, though, don't forget about our Friends and Fiction signed book bundle, which is going fast. As you may know, both Mary Kay and Christy have brand new hardcovers out this summer. If you order the bundle from our friends at Oxford Exchange, you'll get hand-signed first editions of both books as they're released, and some cool Friends and Fiction swag as well, for just $60, which is really a steal, and you'd spend that anyway on the book at a bookstore, so get something extra. Yeah. You can even add on the new paperbacks of Patti's and Kristin's books, and those will come signed as well.
And P.S., think about Mother's Day. It makes a great Mother's Day gift, I think.
I agree.
And it is a good deal. Oxford Exchange is so awesome. Their packages arrive wrapped like presents, so you feel like you're getting something really special. Yeah. And I like to think that you are getting something special. And don't forget, my new novel, Summers at the Saint, just came out yesterday on May 7th, and Christy's latest, A Happier Life, will be out June 25th. And now, speaking of great releases, great new books, let's welcome our friend Ruth Ware. Ruth is an international #1 best-selling author of several novels, including In a Dark, Dark Wood, The Woman in Cabin 10, The Lying Game, The Turn of the Key, One by One, and The It Girl. Her thrillers have appeared on bestseller lists around the world, including the Sunday Times and the New York Times, and have sold more than 6 million copies. Her books have been optioned for both film and TV, and she's published in more than 40 languages.
Wow, that's quite a resume. Ruth lives near Brighton with her family. Her new novel, One Perfect Couple, released on May 21st, and Booklist said it is bound to be a top summer 2024 beach read in a starred review for Booklist. But also, I'd like to congratulate both Mary Kay and Ruth, who are pals on the Library Reads Hall of Fame list for May. So congratulations to both of them.
Thank you. Okay, Sean, can you bring Ruth on?
Hi,
guys. How are you?
Hi, Ruth. All right, let's get started. One Perfect Couple has been described as Love Island meets Survivor meets Lord of the Flies, but with ratty blonde hair extensions, and tattoos, and killer abs. But we'd love to hear your take on what this book is about. And then, what's it really about, Ruth?
Well, I can't do better than that. So, no, I'm kidding. That is a fairly accurate summary. But to give a more kind of plot-based intro, my main character, Lyla, is a scientist. She's a virologist. And she's been in a relationship for a couple of years with her boyfriend, Nico, who's an aspiring actor. And they've hit a kind of bit of a crunch point, both in their careers and in their relationship. And one day, Nico comes home with this incredible bit of news. He's been invited to be on this brand new reality TV show. It could be make or break for his career. He's really excited. But there is one catch, which is that the premise of the show is that it's a reality TV show for couples. In fact, the title of the show is One Perfect Couple. So does Lyla want to come to a desert island with him for a free holiday? Lyla, to be honest, wants to do anything but. She's not a reality TV show fan, but, she wants to be a supportive girlfriend. So she swallows some reservations, says yes, finds herself on this kind of idyllic tropical island in the Indian Ocean, white sand, turquoise sea. But things are a little bit off. Like, you can still smell the wet paint. Some of the facilities aren't finished. The production crew seems a little bit shonky. Things go from bad to worse when on the first night there's a huge tropical storm and most of the camera crew who are all sleeping on the boat are swept away. Contestants wake up the next morning to find the island is just kind of wrecked. There's no water, there's very limited food, and the reality TV show quickly descends into a very different kind of contest where the stakes are life or death. And Lyla realizes that one contestant is out to win at all costs.
Yeah, I love the premise of the book. It initially is such a hoot, and it really kind of nails the reality show vibe. A lot of the behind the scenes things that you wrote in there were great. But of course, it has a twist, of course, in true fashion of Ruth Ware. But tell us about the spark of the idea that inspired One Perfect Couple. We think it came from a conversation with thriller writer Gillian McAllister during a book conversation.
Oh, you have done your research. Yes, it did. We were doing a book event and I actually can't remember how the topic came up, but we started talking about reality TV shows. And Gillian said something to the effect of, that sounds like a Ruth Ware novel. And I thought, kind of does. But I was writing something else at the time, so I just kind of put it to one side. But that idea kind of kept percolating away in the back of my head. And when I finished writing my previous book, which was 0 Days, I suddenly thought, actually, maybe I would like to write about this. But there was one a very big problem, which is that I hadn't really watched reality TV show for years. I got quite addicted to Big Brother, which was kind of the first UK reality TV show. And then I guess just kind of went off it a little bit because, it all seemed to turn into influencers and people who were sort of just in it for, for fame and for the kind of what it would do for their careers rather than, just regular, ordinary people. But then The Traitors came out in the UK, and I don't know if it was such a hit in the US as it was in the UK, but it was huge over here and I was completely addicted to it. It kind of reignited my fascination with reality TV and made me realize that, yes, this definitely was the book that I wanted to write.
That's great.
Tell us about your main character, Lyla, who's, as you said, a virologist, and her actor boyfriend, Nico. And also, I would love it if you would pronounce the kind of mosquito-borne virus Lyla studies. And how mad was your audiobook narrator at having to pronounce that word?
Actually, I've got quite a good relationship with Imogen Church, who does my audiobooks, and she hasn't mentioned that one. She does kind of get in touch every now and again about character names and things like that, but she hasn't brought this up, so maybe she's saving that until we next meet. So Lyla's a scientist, and Ron, you won't know this, you were very sweetly holding up the proof at the beginning of our conversation for anyone who's not watching on video. But the proof doesn't have any of this in. But anybody reading the finished copy will know that the book is actually dedicated to my husband, who is a scientist. And in the acknowledgements at the end, I kind of talk a little bit about this. And writers have a terrible habit of marrying other writers, but I would like to put in a good word for marrying scientists because they are generally very interesting people who I mean, certainly in my family, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think their brains just work in a fundamentally different way from writers. And also there's just something really great about going to the dinner table, and I don't know what he does. He doesn't really know what I do. But yeah, my husband is a virologist. He is working in not exactly the same field as Lyla. Lyla's working on mosquito-borne diseases. So she's working on chikungunya. Which
there's
is,
the word.
That's
there
it.
we go. See, I practiced it. But she's also very interested in dengue, which comes up in the course of the novel because they are in a dengue kind of area. So yes.
That explains a lot. Okay, so reality TV is a really contemporary kind of entertainment. I know it's been around a little bit, but it's just really kind of everywhere now. But the book itself harkens back to the way Agatha Christie did locked room mysteries. It seems to me that you've kind of explored this same trope extensively in thrillers like The Lying Game, which was a boarding school drama, One by One, which was a co-worker snowed in at a luxury mountain resort in a dark, dark wood, which might be my favorite concept, is about what you Brits call a hen do, a bachelorette weekend that goes spectacularly wrong when your main character reunites with her long-estranged best friend in a cottage in a remote forest. I just did your whole book list for you. Tell us what's fascinating.
Thank you. That was great.
Tell us what fascinates you about this theme.
The kind of locked room trope. I should say, because I get occasional tweets and messages about this, some people, so I tend to think of my books as kind of locked room novels, the ones that are, not all of them are in that.
Right.
But I think in a technical sense, a locked room mystery is actually supposed to be one that's kind of like the Speckled Band, the Sherlock Holmes novels or Murder in the Rue Morgue, where it's literally a crime that could not have taken place. I think technically what I write is closed circle mysteries where you've got a finite pool of suspects. But anyway, we all know what we mean when we're talking about a locked room mystery. Right. And it's true. I do keep returning to it. I think there's two reasons. I think one is that as a writer, it's a really interesting way to write a book because it gives you, first of all, it makes you really creative because particularly for crime novels, it means you only have the set of suspects that you start with and you have to pick a murderer, a victim, a detective from that group of people. You can't wheel on, convenient forensic experts or, police officers to figure things out for you. You really only have the materials that you started with at the beginning of the novel. And that makes you have to get super creative with your plotting. It also means that you get to know those characters really well. If you've got a really limited cast of characters, you can really dig into their backgrounds, find out a lot about them, find out what makes them tick. But I think the other reason, which is sort of a non-writerly kind of reason, more of a sort of personal one, is that my personal kind of horror sort of social situation, which I think came out quite strongly in A Dark Wood for anybody who's read it, is being trapped in an unbearable social situation and not being able to get away. That's kind of what makes me feel cold. The idea of being at an awful party or a terrible holiday and you can't leave, whether because of social pressure or because you physically can't leave, as with Lila's situation. And I think, the interesting thing about that is that conflict makes for interesting scenes as a writer. They're fun to write and I think they're fun to read as well. Yeah. And a very easy way to produce conflict is by getting two characters who maybe are not getting along super well and forcing them into proximity. And so a closed circle novel can really do that.
Yeah, close proximity is great. And in exploring group dynamics, which you do so beautifully in this novel. But let's talk about how you flip the script on the old damsels, not just in this book, but in a lot of them. You let the main characters, like scientist Lyla, fight a deadly game of survival. No one's coming to rescue her.
Right.
Literally, in Lila's case. No, it's true. I mean, I think I've always put women front and center in my books as the kind of fixers of their own problems sort of thing. A lot of my books have a sort of similar premise, which is, a regular everyday person finds themselves in a truly extraordinary situation and has to kind of battle their way out of it, sometimes literally, mostly, more in a sort of metaphorical sense. Lyla is particularly in that situation. And I think she's one of my I got really fond of her by the end of the book. And I think part of that was writing a scientist. My husband, he's been in science all of our lives, and a lot of the stuff that I describe in the book, Lila's frustrations with science as a career, and some of the things like having to go in at 5 a.m. to split your cell lines, that was all stuff that he was doing in the early days of our relationships. He'd be looking at his watch at 10 o'clock at night and going, oh gosh, I've got to go in and split my cell lines because they're all about to die. But also I think his qualities as a scientist and as a person, I think scientists are generally just really interesting, questioning people who want to find out as much as possible about the world around them. But more than that, they want to, or try to, obviously, we're not all perfect all the time, but I think they want to take that information and face up to it really fearlessly, even when it's leading them in a direction that they might not have been the one that they were hoping for. And that's something that Lyla faces really early on in the book, when a set of experimental results come in and they're not the results she wanted. She was hoping that these results would show something else, and they don't. And she talks about, her temptation to kind of ignore a few of the sort of inconvenient data points, or sort of, massage the line a bit. But as a good scientist, she cannot do that, because her only duty is to look fearlessly at the truth and try to figure out what that means. And one thing that it hadn't occurred to me when I started writing the book, but as I sort of kind of worked my way through it and began thinking more about who Lyla was as a person, one thing that suddenly struck me was that actually, in a lot of ways, scientists have the same qualities as detectives, in that they're out there, they're trying to figure out the answer to complex, very difficult questions, often, life or death questions in both cases. And they don't always get the answers that they want. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage to face up to those answers. And that's a quality that Lyla carries with her onto Ever After Island, which is what they end up calling the island where they're staying, in that she has to deal with a set of circumstances that she really doesn't want to be coping with. She has to deal with information that she doesn't want to face up to, but she forces herself to do that because of the kind of person that she is. And I got really fond of her by the end of the book. I miss all of my main characters, but I was particularly sad to say goodbye to her.
I love that the producer at the beginning of the book calls her the let's do the G-rated version, the affable girl next door.
Yes. Girl next door, lovable, let's say. There's a non-PG-13 version in the book, but yeah.
She puts her relationship under the microscope as well, literally, as her work.
Yeah, she does, and that's part of why she agrees to go on this rather mad escapade in the first place, because she realizes that she and her partner have come to a kind of make or break point in their relationship. And, a different kind of person would have sort of glossed over that, papered over the cracks, ignored it. But Lyla has to face up to it, because she's someone who has to look information fearlessly head on. And yeah, she very much, she's like the problem solver on the island. Actually, there's a number of women on there, and they all have kind of different contributions that they play in terms of, sorting out their problems, some more practical and some more sort of emotional. But Lyla, I kind of wanted her to be the sort of person where, it should be the person in the friend group who, if you were out camping and there was a giant spider in the corner of the tent, everybody would be shrieking, and Lyla would be the one who'd go and get a paper cup and trap it and take it out. That's her personality.
Good. Definitely. And as a reader, you did such a great job with Lyla in the beginning to let us feel like we could trust her, and kind of like, I was, all right, let's go wherever she's going to go. I'm going to follow it, and I'm going to want the best for her.
I'm glad, because not all of my main characters are sort of trustworthy. I've done my fair share of unreliable narrators, and there might be a bit of that going on in this book. I'm not going to, reveal too much about that. No. But I think ultimately, obviously you read a whodunit because you want to find out who done it. But this book isn't completely that. I think who done it is not really the main question. It's what actually ends up happening and will they get out of here. But what draws you through the book is not the answer to that question. It's the characters
Right.
and whether you care about them and want to stick with them. So if I managed to do that with Lyla, I'm really, really glad.
So it's let's see. So you did it very well, and Mary Kay does this also. Is that you, like a competitive reality show, you actually select the contestants, and they're very carefully plotted in who they are and what they bring to the story. So how did you go about casting the characters that be signed on to the show for One Perfect Couple?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, part of it was just sort of thinking about, as I say, I was not a huge reality TV show watcher before I started writing this book. So I almost had to kind of go out and sort of anthropologically research it. And I got really into Traitors, but that's quite a different sort of reality TV show from the one that I'm writing about in the book, which is much more kind of Love Island, Survivor, that sort of thing. So I sat down and I watched a bunch of sort of episodes and talked to a couple of reality TV contestants, read an amazing biography called I Didn't Come Here to Make Friends by a contestant who was on, I think, The Bachelor, although it might have been The Bachelorette, one of those shows anyway. But I think the fact that I paradoxically hadn't sort of watched it, so much of it as kind of a viewer, meant that I could take a sort of slightly detached kind of anthropological view of it. And it was really interesting to me trying to see like how they typecast people on the show. You know, what are the producers going for here with the mix of personalities that they've brought in? And it was very clear to me that, you know, they had certain qualities that they were trying to fulfill in the contestants. You know, there's always someone who's like the bubbly blonde with the heart of gold, and there's always, you know, the guy that all the women are supposed to fancy, who's kind of a bit of an alpha male, and then there's usually like someone else who he's kind of duking it out with, and there's like, you know, because they want the sort of competitive streak, and then there's you know, usually someone who's stunningly beautiful, and then someone who maybe kind of looks a bit more approachable that you could imagine kind of, you know, sitting down for a pint with or something. And so it was really interesting sort of trying to come up with a mix of people who ticked all of those boxes, but also ticked what I needed in terms of how the plot was going to unfold and the eventual kind of twist, which I won't spoil.
You know, hearing you talk, it's amazing to me. We met at the Savannah Book Festival back in February, and you talked about imposter syndrome, which I think so many of us writers are afflicted with. Talk to us a little bit, because I think what you that talk you gave was really, I think, inspiring and so relatable.
Oh, I love that. I was very nervous about giving that talk because I don't typically love just kind of standing up on a stage and just talking. I tend to prefer kind of conversational formats. So I was quite nervous about doing that. And I think because I was quite nervous, and because as I discussed in the talk, I very foolishly sat down and watched some of their alumni who had done talks in the years before, and they were all uniformly amazing, which increased my sort of sense of imposter syndrome. And because of this, I thought, well, actually, maybe this is what I should talk about. Maybe I should talk about the fact that, you know, I think it's incredibly difficult for a lot of women across, well, people, not just women. I think women are particularly afflicted with it, but, you know, a lot of people have a sense of imposter syndrome. But I think in writing particularly, because fundamentally there's no qualification for this. You know, there's no piece of paper that says I should have the right to, you know, force these good people to listen to my ramblings for 100,000 words versus, you know, whoever else is. Most of us are just here because we love writing stories and we hoped that someone might want to listen to them or read them. But the mystery of sort of how we got here is constant. And, I think that sort of sense of who me, really me, kind of never goes away. But I don't know about you, Mary Kay, but I grew up in a really just regular family. Like, my mum was a stay-at-home mum for most of my childhood. My dad worked in IT. We didn't know anybody who was writers. We didn't know anyone who made their living in the creative industries. And when I was at school, they didn't have programs of kind of bringing writers in to talk to the kids and say, here's how I did it, here's how you could do it. So I think it just didn't really occur to me that regular, ordinary people were allowed to do this. And I think, most of my career has been a sort of a realization that if I didn't, yes, there might be rejection along the way. Yes, I might end up, crashing and burning. But if I didn't put myself out there and take a few risks, I wasn't going to be able to do this. And eventually, a sort of realization that actually maybe I did have something to say, and that maybe, other people would enjoy hearing it, and a kind of continued gratitude and astonishment at that.
Yeah, I love the idea that your children were quite young, right? When you finally decided you'd been working in publishing as a publicist, I guess. And all of a sudden you finally said to yourself, if not now, when?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was, people talk a lot about kids being the death of a creative career and so on, but I've found that very much not to be true. And it was when my kids were very small. I was on maternity leave with my second baby, and I was about to go back to work in this pretty demanding job. And I had this idea for a book kind of crept into the back of my head. And I thought, I am not going to have time to write this in a few months. I'll be back at work. We're very lucky to have quite long maternity leave in the UK. But even still, I was sort of staring down the barrel of having a few weeks left of maternity leave with my kids. And then I was like, I'll be back at work. I'll be doing the school run or the nursery run. I'll be trying to, make dinner for everything. There's just not going to be enough hours in the day for me to write this novel. And I thought the only way I'm going to get to keep this in my life, at least for the foreseeable future until my kids get a bit older, is if I actually make it pay. And that was what made me sort of get off my butt and go and submit. Right. I wrote the book for the first time with the view of getting it published, and with the intention of sending it out to agents. And that was what made me finally kind of get over my own I guess it's a sort of weird mixture, isn't it? It's a kind of mixture of imposter syndrome of thinking I can't possibly do this, but a sort of arrogance of thinking, I'm too special to be told no. What if someone rejects me? I'll never recover. And it was that kind of use it or lose it moment of, well, if you don't get over yourself and do something about this, you're not going to be able to do any writing for the next 10 years. And at that point, I think, I decided that the prospect of losing this thing that I loved was more important than a bit of hurt pride. So
I love that. I love it very much. So recently, the Friends in Fiction authors did a little thing about debuts and getting your first start. What was it like when you got your first contract?
Gosh, yeah. So that was for the book that I wrote on maternity leave, and I sent it out to a bunch of agents, super hopefully, and of course they all rejected it. I don't know any writers who haven't had there's probably some out there who, got signed up on their first, but we hate them. No, we don't. We're very happy for them. And so, I went back and I revised it. And for the first time, actually, I showed my work to my friends, which I think they knew that I was writing, but I hadn't kind of let them read it. And I have a very good bunch of friends who I've known since school. And I always say to other writers, if you're going to show your book to friends and family, you don't want to show it to your incredibly supportive godmother or, your aunt who's a complete darling and thinks that, everything you do is amazing. What you want is the friend who, if you went into a changing room and tried on a dress and said, do I look good in this? If you didn't, they would say no. And not everybody will do that. There's an awful lot of people who'll just say, oh, you look amazing, you should definitely buy it, because they think that's what you want to hear. But you want the friend who will say, do you know what? Actually, no, that's not your colour. And I have a really amazing group of friends who would tell me if a dress did not suit me. And I thought, okay, they'll be honest. And they were. didn't agree with everything that they said, but they were, they told me the bits that they liked. They told me the bits that they didn't understand. They told me the bits that, were confusing or boring or cringy or whatever it was. And so I took all of that into account. I rewrote, I joined a writers group and got some really good feedback from them. And then I sent it out again to another group of agents. This was about probably, nearly 2 years on, maybe, from first having the idea. And this time it got picked up by an amazing agent who is still my agent today. And she sent it out to a bunch of editors. And this goes back to, my family not knowing any writers. So she sent it out and we got an offer in, and it was a really good offer. But my agent said, I think we can do better. And I phoned up my dad and told him, and he said, "Oh no, dear, I think you should take the money and run. If you try and beat them up, they might disappear." And I was like, "Oh, maybe he's right." And I was like, "I think my agent knows what she's doing. Like, she's been in this business for a while." So I trusted her, and it all worked out fine. But yeah.
That's terrific.
It's always fun hearing about the call.
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah, that was amazing. And to be honest, I think actually the happiest moment, not the happiest moment, no, that's not. I've had some amazing moments, but the moment that I always think about when I try and sort of pinpoint when my writing journey started, as kind of when I started to consider myself a professional writer, was I'd had the email from my now agent to say that she was interested in representing me. I'd gone and had a meeting, and it had gone really well. I was really happy. And then I got the sort of formal email saying, yes, I would really love to represent you. And I emailed back going, yes, I signed with you. It was, it's all great. And I remember lying on my bed in the sunshine, and we were renovating our house at the time. So the house was an absolute bomb site. There was like plaster dust everywhere. I could hear men sawing and hammering downstairs, but I just lay on my bed in the sunshine, and I thought, this might be the happiest I'll ever be, because it could all go horribly downhill from here. Right. But at the moment I'm on cloud 9, so I should try to, whatever happens, I should try to hold on to this moment and remember how I felt, and remember that I'm now someone felt it was worth professionally investing in. And if I feel, when I have moments of doubt, which I obviously still do, imposter syndrome doesn't go away overnight, unfortunately. I do think back to that moment, and I think back to reassuring myself that, my agent is an amazing woman with great taste, and she has faith in me.
Great. Yes. That just supports the what is the line, that you only get one first.
Yeah.
So I want
to. Yeah, and you have to hang on to that moment.
Yes. Yeah. And keep reminding yourself of it, I think. So back to the book just a little bit. Did you have this book all plotted out, or were there bends in the road that surprised you?
So I tend to plot all of my books roughly the same way now. I kind of gone back and forth slightly over the years, but the way that I plot now seems to work for me. Although having said that, all books are different. I might come up on a book that wants to be plotted in a different way. But what I do now is I tend to have a place that I'm starting from, a group of characters who I try to sort of think about them for a while before I start writing, and a sort of a what-if setup. So I guess with Lyla, I'd been thinking about Lyla and Nico, but the kind of the what if was like, the fact that she's invited to go on this reality TV show. She doesn't really want to be there, and it all goes horribly wrong. And then because of the kind of books I write, which are quite sort of, I guess, Agatha Christie-ish in terms of, I like to drop clues for readers. I like to give them a chance of sort of guessing how it's all going to pan out. I, generally speaking, always know how the book will end up in terms of, if there's a whodunit, who did it and how. This book it's really hard to talk about without spoiling, which I definitely don't want to do, but this book is a little bit different in that respect. It's not like the It Girl, where you've got kind of a definite whodunit, and my character is trying to track down the perpetrator, and it's a matter of cracking how they did it. This book is a bit different in that from page 1 that someone is going to end up getting killed. You're just not completely sure who it will be and how the path will end up at this position.
Right.
So that's sort of what the reader's trying to find out. But I always knew how that scene would go. I wrote the passage that begins the book, which is a man and a woman fighting for their lives. I wrote that first of all, so I knew it would end up at that point. I sometimes go back and sort of rejig prologues, but that one didn't. It stayed. And I knew, again, this is quite hard to talk about without spoiling, but there's sort of documents and diary entries kind of filtered throughout the book that give you little sort of flash forwards, little bits of information, maybe cast a bit of doubt on what's actually going on the island. And I knew sort of roughly how those were going to pan out because, again, I wrote those in line with the rest of the text. So I sort of had to be kind of thinking one step ahead each time, which was interesting.
You had me guessing, boy, that prologue was so like, okay, I kept thinking about it all through the book. Like, how's this going to play out? How does this fit into the story?
Good. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'm very glad that worked because what you don't worry about is someone just going to, because, half the time I skip prologues. So then that would really mess things up. But also, sometimes you read it and you just instantly forget it.
Well, and the Mayday calls too kept me flipping the page.
Good. Well, I'm glad it all worked the way it was supposed to. So
it really did. Ruth, we're always looking forward to your new releases along with readers everywhere. Can you share what you're working on currently, or is that a secret?
So normally I would be able to by this point because I'd be kind of well into a book. But I'm actually working on a secret project at the moment, which has not been announced. So I can't, which is very unusual for me and an uncomfortable feeling because I'd love to be able to give some snippets, but I can't. So that's all I can say is that it's secret. So watch this space.
Nothing wrong with that because that gives us something to look forward to.
A cliffhanger.
Yes.
Yeah, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, and that would be terrible.
No. Then I wouldn't be alive to see whatever the surprise is. Okay, Ruth, if you'd stick around, we have one more question for you at the end. But first, we're going to have a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
Now, for all of you watching and listening, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies, multiple copies of One Perfect Couple.
Many.
The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll be getting the book on a discount. Rana's over there waving it and helping to fund our show, all while supporting our beloved indie booksellers nationwide.
We also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group, which is nearly 250,000 members strong. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay on top of upcoming Friends and Fiction show guests, in-person events, shop our merch store, order our book subscription box, and sign up for our weekly email newsletter, which is chock full of bonus content.
And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can catch all of our back episodes, and there are like 200 of them, and never miss a thing. And when you subscribe to our podcast, you can take us with you wherever you go, even to... what's the name of the island, Ruth?
Ever After Island.
You go to Ever After Island on a yacht. You can take us on the podcast with you.
I would rather not go to that island, but
no.
I think I would rather not too. Yeah.
Okay, Ruth, can you tell everybody out there how to connect with you, where they can find out what's going on with your work, where they can see you on book tour, and learn about the surprise coming up?
Yes. So I'm on most social media platforms as @RuthWareWriter. Definitely Facebook, Instagram, Threads, a little bit of Twitter. Are we allowed to say Twitter anymore? I can't keep up. So yeah, come and find me on there. I also have a website, ruthware.com. And I'll be posting information about my forthcoming tour up there very soon. It might even be up there by the time you hear this. And yeah, information about my new secret project. Once I can talk about it, I will be splashing it all over those social media channels. So
can't wait.
Can't wait. Ruth, thank you so much for talking to us today and telling us about Lyla and Nico and the island and One Perfect Couple. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for being with us on the Friends and Fiction Show.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Always a joy to see you. And be sure to tune in next week for when the Fab Four will be together live to celebrate the release of Mary Kay's newest Summers at the Saint. You aren't going to want to miss it. That show will air live on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, May 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it will be posted to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, May 17th.
Thanks to all of you out there for being with us. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.